Welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, I want you to think about your typical morning routine for just a second. You wake up, you grab your phone, and within 60 seconds, you are bombarded by a sheer avalanche of opinions. Every single post, every news alert, every trending topic is demanding that you take a stance. We are constantly, obsessively categorizing the world around us. This person is good, that person is toxic, this policy is right, that idea is completely wrong. It is non-stop. And frankly, it's creating an absolute epidemic of modern exhaustion. The cognitive load of having to judge literally every single thing we encounter, it's burning us out. But what if the ultimate antidote to this 21st century binary exhaustion is actually, over 800 years old? Today, we are looking to the 13th century Persian mystic and poet Rumi, and we're deeply exploring his profound, timeless concept, the field of being.
Right doing versus wrongdoing. Okay, let's dive into this because it is the exhausting trap of rigid binary thinking that we fall into every single day. We construct these massive, fortified mental walls, constantly playing this endless game of us versus them. And psychologically, it takes a tremendous amount of caloric energy to constantly enforce these borders, to wake up every single day and decide who's an ally and who's an enemy based on arbitrary lines in the sand. This whole obsession with labeling, it completely alienates us from one another and just drains our capacity for real empathy. Rumi actually saw this exact human impulse centuries ago, way before the internet came along and amplified it, and he offered a really profound way out.
So rather than just an agenda, think of this as our map to reaching a truly transformative state of consciousness. We're going to journey through 4 key steps. First, discovering the field of being. Then, escaping the dualism trap, unlocking the power of pure presence, and finally, erasing boundaries between us. All right, let's transition right into step 1, the field of being. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. Just take a moment and let the sheer weight of that invitation really sink in. Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi was a 13th century Sufi mystic, and this is perhaps his most famous, most radical thought. He isn't just writing pretty poetry here. He is describing the absolute core philosophy of Sufi non-dualism. And non-dualism is basically this understanding that the universe isn't fundamentally split into 2 opposing fighting forces, like good and evil or self and other. Rather, everything is part of one unified whole. So Rumi is actively asking us to physically and mentally step outside our exhausting human impulse to judge and condemn, and to enter a space of unconditional unity. Now, to actually reach this state of consciousness, because it's a state of mind, not a physical place, we have to navigate these 3 deliberate steps. So what does this look like in practice? Let's say you're caught in a super tense political argument at a family dinner, or you're deep in some toxic comment thread online. We've all been there, right? Stripping away your ego means silencing that little voice in your head screaming, "I need to prove I'm smarter." Dropping moral posturing, that means giving up the urge to just perform your own goodness for an audience. And abandoning ideological battles right in the middle of a conversation doesn't mean you actually agree with the other person. Actually, scratch that. It means you suddenly realize that the living, breathing human sitting in front of you is infinitely more valuable than the temporary victory of winning a debate. You literally just drop the rope and you step into the field. Which brings us to the next part of our map. Step 2, escaping the dualism trap. And this brilliantly illustrates the core issue. We live in a world defined by this trap of rigid binary thinking. Where asserting I am right inherently demands that you must be wrong. It turns all of life into this exhausting zero-sum game of winning and losing. But the radical shift that Rumi proposes is dropping the judgment entirely to discover a very different kind of truth. In non-dualism, true reality doesn't require an opposing side to exist. It's like this sky. The sky doesn't exist in opposition to the ground, trying to defeat it in an argument. It simply is. Escaping the dualism trap means finding that quiet, unshakable center within yourself that doesn't need to fight anyone at all to prove it's real. So let's move into our 3rd pillar, step 3. The power of pure presence. Let's look at how the widely known English translation by Coleman Barks continues this truly beautiful thought. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Think about that visceral imagery for a second. Lying down in deep, quiet grass. It's a complete surrender. And what does it mean for the world to be too full to talk about? It's that overwhelming, breathtaking sensation of awe.
When you stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon or look up at a completely clear, starry night sky, you don't feel the need to start an argument with it, do you? You don't critique the stars. The sheer magnitude of the beauty completely bypasses your brain's need to categorize, leaving you in a state of absolute, quiet reverence.
Silence over syntax. I want you to try and recall a moment in your own life where you shared a truly profound silence with someone. Maybe it was right after a grueling, hours-long argument with a partner. You're both totally emotionally drained. The perfectly crafted defensive logic, the sharp syntax, it's all entirely failed to solve the problem. But then there's a shift, a shared sigh, a glance where you realize that beneath all those angry words, a deeper, unspoken understanding and love still remains. True connection, you see, often begins precisely where our words run out.
Because what remains when the words are finally gone is pure presence. Our modern anxiety largely stems from treating our lives like a resume that we constantly have to defend. We feel this crushing, everyday obligation to explain our choices, justify our value, and analyze our trauma endlessly. But the relief Rumi offers here is so profound. When you finally stop trying to explain, defend, or analyze your existence, you can actually just experience it fully. You drop the resume, you drop the armor, you just breathe, and you just be.
And that leads us to our final pillar. Step 4, erasing boundaries between us.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Rumi takes this state of pure presence even further. The poem continues, ideas, language, even the phrase each other no longer makes any sense. This is literally the ultimate breakdown of our conventional human constructs. Language is an incredible tool, for sure, but its very nature is to divide. I mean, to name a tree is to conceptually separate it from the earth it grows in. Rumi is pointing out that in the deepest states of presence, the very labels we use to define reality begin to completely dissolve, because those labels are just crude tools trying to describe a unified reality.
Let's look really closely at that phrase, each other. We use it effortlessly every single day, yet fundamentally, it enforces separation. It dictates that there is an isolated me over here and a totally disconnected you over there. In Sufi poetry, there's this really famous motif of a single drop of water. As long as it's falling through the sky, it's a drop, right? But the moment it hits the ocean, it completely loses its boundary. It stops being a drop, and it just becomes the ocean itself. When deep, radical empathy is achieved in the field of being, the boundary between self and non-self is erased, just like that drop of water. You realize there never actually was an other. We are all woven from the exact same underlying fabric of existence. So every single day, we are faced with a fundamental choice in how we navigate this world. We can engage in the exhausting, never-ending cycle of judgment and division, policing the borders of who is right and who is wrong, and completely burning ourselves out in the process. Or we can choose the quiet, radical act of presence and unity. And look, choosing unity doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means choosing a higher form of consciousness where deep empathy overrides the ego's desperate need to always be correct.
So, I want to leave you lingering in Rumi's field with this one final, provocative question. Where can you choose unity over division today? Where in your own life can you drop the exhausting need to be right, walk past the ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, and simply meet someone in the field? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep exploring, and I'll see you in the field.